Serious. What is the most mysterious, unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? I remember vividly one time that my parents took me to a school park on the way to my dad's parents' house. At the time, we didn't visit them often, and the car ride was long, even for 11 years old, so I didn't question it. I remember my dad didn't have enough space in his car for me and my two sisters, which made me confused because there was space, but okay, and he just took off without me. Well, my mom showed up in her car, but for some reason, instead of leaving, we went into the school. The halls were white and an ugly mustard yellow, and the lockers on the sides were a light blue-green. We passed this one locker. I can't remember the number, but it was something like 247. That had a dent on the front of it. Well, then a weird duck toy came down the hall and ate me, so I woke up screaming. It was almost twice my size, and on this weird car tires that didn't fit its body. The duck thing was wooden and a dark green instead of the normal yellow. I was terrified. Keeping in mind that this was the most surreal dream I ever had, I told my parents and they laughed at it and told me it was just a dream that I had made up. A few years ago, we actually got to go into the school for a fundraiser that my grandmother was at for a second. As we were walking, I realized what hall we were in, and before I could stop myself, I went looking for locker 247. When I found it, there was this girl getting something out of it, but it was exactly like my dream. The same dent in the same place. So I was freaked out, but I'm a 13-year-old at this point. I need to be cool, even near kids I don't know, and she was older than me and cool looking. She also noticed that I was there, so I brush it off and pretend I'm not scared or freaking out. When the girl turns around, I see that she has this keychain hanging from her backpack strap. It's a green wooden duck, exactly like my dream, except it wasn't 6 feet tall and chasing me. I'm used to having dreams that give me a deja vu feeling, but I've never had one like that before or since. It still scares me, and I don't like driving by that school anymore. Here's one that happened last week. It was a nice Monday evening, and I was finishing up vacuuming my house where I live alone. I carried the vacuum through the hall to the spare bedroom where I put it away, grabbed a duster, and started dusting. Now, in the closet, there is a hatch in the ceiling that leads to, I presume, some sort of insulation space or pipe access or something. I've always kind of wondered, mostly as a thought experiment, whether somebody's been hiding up there, only coming out at night. It would explain some weird things that happened in my house, like things getting moved around and such. Nothing that couldn't be explained by my own absent-mindedness, but still. This particular day, I decided to shout up at the hatch, see if anybody was really up there. Again, not because I thought somebody actually was, but more as of a joke to see what happens. Things like, "I know you're up there, come out," and "Don't make me come up there and get you." Finally, I finished with, "I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I stopped there, decided this wasn't worth it, and went back to dusting. Then I stepped back into the hallway I had just come from not 60 seconds before, and there was a playing card. A playing card lying face down on the floor, which definitely had not been there a moment ago. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a 4. I'm still baffled as to how it got there. There's no furniture in that hallway that it could have fallen from, and there's no way I could have missed it. It was bright red, and on the floor was more of a grayish blue. It stood out. I even recognized the deck it was from. It was a deck of cards I hadn't touched in months, maybe years, which was sealed inside a magnetic case and also underneath another box inside that very closet where I had been shouting at the ceiling. I'm baffled. I've gone over everything that might possibly have passed over that spot in the time between when I walked down the hallway and when I saw the card. None of it makes any real sense. I honestly, genuinely cannot think of an explanation. It freaked me out badly enough that I searched the whole house with a weapon, and I've now taken to locking my bedroom door at night. I really don't have a clue. TLDR. I shouted the numbers 1 through 4 at the imaginary man in my ceiling. A 4 of hearts magically appears in my hallway a few seconds later. When my son was about 2, he was just starting to talk, and the only words he knew at the time were dada, kitty, mama, and maybe a couple more. One day I was sitting on my couch in the living room, and I can hear my son talking to someone in the kitchen. He seemed very enthusiastic and happy to be talking. It was all mumbles that I could hear through, and a bit of laughter. So I get up and I go see what he's doing. When I get to the kitchen, I see him staring downstairs into the basement. There was a see-through childproof gate. The mumbling stopped when I walked up and I said, "Who you talking to, buddy?" And clear as day and without question, he answered, "Jesus." My wife and I are not religious in any way. Same with my parents and my wife's parents. He was in no daycare at the time. It still creeps me out when I think about it. LOL. My family has a home phone that rings pretty often every day. Sometimes we get family calls, but 95% of the time, it's just ads and telemarketers and other stuff like that. And whenever the phone rings, I have a bad habit of just waiting for someone else to pick it up because I'm too lazy to get it myself. But one day, when the phone rang, I got this weird, unexplainable gut feeling. I didn't know what it was or why I felt that way, but something was telling me that I absolutely had to pick up that phone. So I did. My mom picked up at the same time. Turns out it was my aunt calling to say that my grandma was in the hospital because her heart had stopped. I immediately ran downstairs to find my mom, who was in tears, and held her while she was on the phone with my aunt. My grandma passed away that night. She was in a different country at the time, so we couldn't go and be with her, but we were there on the phone when the doctor said that she had passed. A year later, I mentioned this gut feeling I'd gotten to my mom. She's a really spiritual person, so she sincerely believes that some sort of higher power decided to convince me to pick up that phone. If I hadn't, I probably would have had to hear from somebody else that my grandma was gone. And that thought would definitely make me feel like shit for the rest of my life, knowing that I wasn't there for my mom when she needed me, or for my grandma in her last moments. My daughter, basically. And actually, she's gotten kinda hilarious now that she's hit puberty. I have many stories where she did creepy stuff like read my mind, talked to dead people. And I never really believed in that stuff before her, and I'm still not sure how much I believe it's supernatural, and not really just her being dialed in on a different level to those around her, but the output is the same. She does unexplainable things all the time, and has for like the last 10 years. Anyways, the funny part is that she got mad at me yesterday because I told her she couldn't bring 4 pairs of shoes on our bike ride. I wasn't going to carry all that crap in my backpack, so I told her straight up she didn't need it. And if you can't read my mind as to why, just use common sense. Seriously, little phrases like that have become just normal with her. But her reaction was the best/maybe worst. She bursts into tears and says, "No, I can't tell what you're thinking or what anyone is thinking because hormones are the worst and you're the worst. And this puberty thing sucks. And I just want 4 pairs of shoes." Then she stormed inside. I was on vacation with my family in the USA. My mom, sister, and I flew down a few weeks before my dad joined us. Due to work, I had to leave a few days after my father arrived. Now, key info. I had an old tobacco pipe in my room at home. My parents didn't know about it, and I was not going to bring it into the USA with me. I'm not a moron. This pipe was wrapped in a bag in an old jewelry box at the back of a cupboard in my bathroom and my bedroom at my parents' house. Now, when I went to unpack my suitcase to leave, my suitcase that had been unpacked for 2 weeks and only had some laundry in it, I opened the top and I found my pipe sitting there on top of all my laundry, perfectly centered, just waiting for me. No one in my family has owned up to bringing this pipe through the airport, through customs, and sneaking it into my suitcase. The pipe was left in Florida. I moved across the country twice. The pipe is currently in my living room. How did it get to Florida? Why didn't it stay in Florida? A few years ago, me and my boyfriend went on holiday to a cottage in rural England. It was a beautiful grade 2, listed 17th century cottage, and we were super excited to call this place home for a week. The first night we stayed, I didn't sleep very well and was very restless, but I just attributed it to the long car journey it took to get there. As the week went on, every night when we went to bed, I just felt incredibly uneasy and paranoid. The bedroom layout was that because the ceiling was sloped, there was a large empty space left behind the bed, and the bedroom door was directly in front of the bed. Whenever I would close my eyes to try and settle down, I would immediately feel a sense of not being alone, for lack of a better phrase. I would lie down for 2 minutes, then feel the need to check behind the bed, watch the door, etc. As soon as eventually drifted off to sleep, my eyes would ping open again, because this overwhelming need to keep an eye on the door, I made my boyfriend sleep with the lights on the entire week. It was strange, because I didn't feel that way in any other room of the house, just the bedroom, and only at night. I've never felt this way in any place before, and I've never experienced anything paranormal or similar. When me and my boyfriend got home, I talked to him about how oppressive the room was and paranoid I felt, and he said he felt the exact same thing. He just didn't want to say anything because he knew it would freak me out. Was staying over at my brother's, who was a music producer, to watch his dogs for a bit. He was leaving in the morning, so he was still there at night. I'm downstairs and I hear piano music, very faint, but still an obvious melody, coming through the vent in his basement door. All his recording stuff is down there, so I thought maybe he had his computer set to play his beats at night. I pressed my ear to it to confirm and knew it was music being played. But as I went to open the door to further investigate, something in my head was telling me, this is some dumb white people horror movie type shit you're about to do. So I just walked back to the couch and waited till morning. When he and his roommate he was traveling with came down in the morning, I made mention of the piano playing. They both immediately darted heads to each other and said, "Oh shit, he heard it too." As apparently they both had heard the music on separate occasions themselves. The only piano he had was electronic, unplugged from the computer, and his computer and speakers were all shut down. Still have no answers, but it was definitely a bit spooky. I worked in a haunted house attraction year-round for about 5 years as a scare actor. Sometimes we would stay overnight if we were building stuff or had to open early. When this place was built, a medium was brought in to call spirits to the site. Before I worked there, I was very skeptical towards anything paranormal. I still am, but I can explain some of the things I saw there. This experience was by far one of the strangest. Usually, when we stayed overnight, around 2 to 5 a.m., we would always hear soft footsteps on the upper floors. This particular night, I was fast asleep. Then I was startled awake to the sound of booming footsteps. It sounded like someone was stomping angrily or running down towards me. I stayed very still because I didn't know if someone could be breaking in. After the footsteps reached my general area, I hear a tap on the wall next to my head. I was frozen in fear. Then I felt a strange sensation on my ear. It felt like someone was touching my ear, like tickling it, or like a spider was crawling on it or something. Very tingly. I was terrified, but eventually I reached up to my ear to find nothing there. There were other times that I would become startled awake to the sound of screaming or items being dragged or dropped. Other times, one of us would lose a certain item, then it would show back up weeks later in the middle of the floor, and no way for it to have gotten there. Sometimes we would see doppelgangers of each other when the person was elsewhere. I took these things as signs of affection from the ghosts. They never hurt me, but they did love a good scare, just like we did. When I had to leave that job, I took some personal items home that had been there for years and years. They were given to me. However, since having them in my home, I've witnessed one of them fall over on its own accord. I've heard some weird, unexplainable sounds. I wouldn't mind if someone followed me home. This was scary as hell to me as a kid, but it's fun to tell people this story now that I've grown up. So when I was a kid, I was always left alone on mornings until late noon because my dad had morning shifts and my mom had to accompany my sister to school. I wasn't really scared being left alone because I've concluded that ghosts only come out at night. So I was playing this game on our computer, and suddenly the game froze and our PC made this weird, loud, repetitive sound. I was like, okay, what the heck? I was really confused on what to do, but it wasn't much of a surprise as our computer was old and is prone to glitching. However, as time passes by, I was trying to shut down the computer. The sound was kind of getting creepy because it wouldn't stop and it was really loud. I ran to our backyard just to calm down a bit and ask my neighbors for help with the computer. However, when I went outside, I suddenly heard our chair being moved. This chair is really old and is built by my late grandfather. I was really scared this time, but I mustered all of my courage to check back inside, only to see one of the pillows on the chair lying on the floor. Needless to say, I stayed outside the whole time until my family got back home. I was driving with a buddy. When it was almost dark, I was young and an irresponsible driver. When driving up to a higher traffic road, I never really cared about the bicycle lane and drove right up to the road to look for cars so I can pass. In my defense, we live in a really low-pop region where you rarely see someone where we drove, especially at that time of day. It's still no excuse for my driving behavior back then. So I drove up to the street, as I always have, not caring about the bicycle lane. I remember checking for lights or any indicator for someone coming by, but there wasn't a single one. Without even thinking, I stopped before the bicycle lane without knowing why. I just waited there, looking straight forward, like I knew something gonna happen, and just a few seconds later, someone passed by on a bicycle. I was speechless. Why that happened? Why I had stopped without reason, as I knew I wouldn't have stopped there. My buddy also asked me how I knew the bicycle was there, and I couldn't tell him why. It was just a feeling. If I drove up to that street, as always, it would have ended in a crash, 100%. Since then, I don't know why I've done it different or how I could tell someone's coming. But since then, I always expect someone on foot or bike around corners I cannot see. I don't want to take someone's life, ever. After my great-grandfather passed away, I was 8. I started sleeping in what was his room. He was old and blind, and I annoyed the F out of him for sure with all the noise I'd make playing with my friends, but he was always very kind and loving towards me. All growing up, I used to sit on his lap and he'd tell me the same stories over and over, and afterwards give me a toonie or loony to get candy from the store. I guess it was kind of our thing. I was the only great-grandchild he had. Anyways, so I'm sleeping in his room and have this super vivid dream that he was sitting on the side of the bed. I wasn't scared at all. I knew it was a dream, and I was hoping it meant he was in heaven and watching over me. I don't remember what he said, if anything, but I remember him holding my hand and giving me a toonie. When I woke up, excited to tell my folks that I had a dream about Great Pop, there was a toonie on the nightstand. Maybe it was there all along and manifested into my dream, but I swore the table only had a lamp on it. I even asked my grandparents if they left it there or had seen it, and they hadn't. I don't know if it was supernatural or not, but to this day, nearly 21 years later, I still have the toonie to remember him by as a sort of good luck charm.